Hello friends, welcome back. Today we're going to be doing two Dollar Tree DIYs. They both hang and they are both focused on spring. So I love them both. I love how they turned out. I hope you do too. Real quick before we get started, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do hit that button and the bell. That way you're notified every time I upload a new video. And don't forget to like and share with your friends. So let's go ahead and get started. So we are going to start with this bright and cheery spring wreath. I love doing wreaths for every season and every holiday. It's the quickest and easiest way to switch things out. So I used 2 bunches of the white lilies. I used 4 bunches of the yellow narcissus. And I think I used 6 of the white larkspur. I think that's the name of that flower. I'm not sure. The Dollar Tree's flowers don't always look like the plant that they're supposed to be, but I just put a base of a little bit of greenery down, and I pulled the flowers off of the stems and then pulled the greenery off and put it down. It's probably not necessary, but I always just feel better if I've got a little bit of greenery at the base of the wreath. So these flowers in particular do not stand straight up. They kind of lean or sway to one side. So I'm making sure that they're all going towards the center of the wreath, if that makes sense, and kind of leaning inward. And I line them up in rows of 3 all the way around the wreath. And where they connect, I just kind of added a few just to fill it in. So I'm going to do the same thing with the yellow narcissus. I'm going to pull them off the stem, and I'm going to pull the greenery off as well. And I'm going to start adding them in selected areas. I'm not adding these yellow flowers all through the wreath. I'm doing focused areas where I'm putting the yellow. So I just kind of group them together, and then I'll move over to another area and group some more together. I actually love how these 2 flowers look together. It's just so bright and sunshiny to me. I am so longing for the sunshine, so I think that's why I chose yellow. Normally in the spring, I'm going to choose a pastel pink or lavender, but this year the yellow just really jumped out at me, and I absolutely love it. So obviously with this base flower, the white larkspur, you could use any on top, any other flower you choose, any color. I really just think this larkspur makes a nice base for this wreath though. So once I get my yellow flowers where I want them, I'm just gonna do 2 groupings for the moment. And then I'm gonna move on to my lilies, and I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna pull them off of their stems and the greenery as well. And I'm going to choose a side and start hot gluing groups of the lilies together in one focused area. So normally when I'm doing a wreath like this, I'm gonna use 2 or 3 groupings of the same flower in any given area. But for this wreath, I'm using more, and I'm focusing them on one side of the wreath. And what I'm gonna use to balance it out is greenery. And I'm gonna go back in and add some more of that larkspur to kind of plump it up a little bit more and give it a little bit more weight on the other side. But the greenery really tricks the eye into filling out the other side. And sometimes it's fun to use leaves to balance out the other side instead of just all flowers. Gives your wreath just a little bit more interest. And you'll notice that I'm using the narcissus leaves here, and they're long and narrow, so I'm gluing two together. And how I'm putting them in there is a little bit like a fan, kind of fanning them out on one side. And yeah, it just kind of mimics the rows of 3 that I did with the larkspur. So with these lily leaves, that's a tongue twister, I'm just kind of showcasing the lilies and adding the greenery around them. And yeah, just kind of filling things out. So once I get that done, I'm going to go ahead and add some more yellow. Like I had said before, I like to have the colors spread out equally. So I want to add a little bit more yellow on one side, and I want to fill out this side a little bit more with the larkspur and just kind of plump up that side. Those lilies are so big on the other side. I wanted this area just a little bit fuller. And again, I just wanted to point out that I am making sure that those flowers are kind of leaning in a little bit. They're going in the same direction, kind of leaning towards the center. But it kind of creates like a movement on the wreath. I don't know if that makes sense, but in my mind it does, so that's why I'm doing it that way. But I'm getting those filled out, and then I'm going to add my yellow in there. And I could add ribbon. I could do a big bow on it if I wanted. I don't really feel like a wreath like this needs a bow, because it's got so much going on in it. It's not so much with the colors. I tried to keep the colors very simple and like fresh feeling, like spring feels. But the impact of the lilies all on one side, I just didn't feel like it needed a bow, so I want to keep that real simple. Okay, so the color that I've chosen is just a very pale yellow, very simple ribbon. And like I said, I'm not gonna add a bow. I'm just gonna create a very large loop through the wreath, and I can hang it from that. It's just very simple. And I love how this turned out. It's a very bright and cheery and fresh, and just a nice greeting at my front door. Okay, now that our wreath is made and hung at the door, let's go ahead and start on our next DIY. So I bought 5 of the faux wrought iron garden gates from the Dollar Tree. So actually I have to start out by saying this is not my brilliant idea. I seen this on another YouTube channel, and the channel's name is Levin Life's Journey with Chantel, and I will leave the link in the description box. But I will say that mine is a little bit different, but I did get my idea from her, so I did want to give her credit for that. So I am cutting my wrought iron or faux wrought iron pieces in smaller parts, and I actually followed her directions on this part of it. So I want to cut 2 shapes out like this, and I'm going to trim up any jagged edges, or just kind of try to make everything nice and smooth and round as best I can. These are plastic, so they're really easy to cut. I'm using my garden shears, which weren't very precise. That was my only complaint about using them, but yeah, other than that. So I go ahead and cut my pieces. Like I said, I got 2 of the bigger size pieces, and they kind of look like a tulip head to me. And then I'm going to cut 3 that look like an X with the little arrow on one end of it. I hope that makes sense. So keep in mind when you're cutting these, you might be using the piece next to it. So, try to be careful. If you're cutting down the center of something, try to stay in the center, because you never know what parts you're going to use for something else. I ended up using parts that were probably tossable, if that makes sense. So I need 3 pieces like that. So I'm going to go ahead and cut those. Okay, so as I'm cutting, I'm saving these extra pieces that I'm cutting off because I might be able to use those for something else. So I've got 2 cut out. Here's the 3rd. I'm just going to cut that little bar off the bottom. And then I'm going to start cutting straight up the center. So as I cut it up carefully, cut it up the center to split this, I'm going to leave that arrow on one side. So I'll end up with kind of a C shape and then a C shape with an arrow attached to it. So I'm going to do that to 2 of those 3 pieces that I cut. I'm going to leave one of them like an X. And I will say, when you're cutting, when you're choosing the 2 pieces to cut, one into a C shape and the other one with the arrow, make sure that the arrows you have a left and a right, because they're going to be facing down, and you want a loop on the inside and an arrow on the outside. So if that makes sense. So I'm going to be attaching everything with hot glue, and I'm going to use black electrical tape because it's super sticky and it's black. So, okay, so let's start gluing these pieces together. So I've got my tulip head piece down, and I've got that X piece with the arrow on it. So I've got the arrow facing down, and I'm going to glue it on top of that tulip head. And I'm going to add a little piece of electrical tape right in the center there to just hold it still. And it's just going to work better than the hot glue. So now that I've got that glued together, then I'm going to glue these other little pieces on the edges and make sure there's nothing loose. I just want to make sure everything's glued down. And at this point, I decided to move on to a lighter colored carpet so you guys could see better. So with those C shapes with the arrow attached to them, I'm gonna hot glue those onto the bottom of this, and the arrow is just kind of going across the bottom loop on there. And I'm just gonna hot glue all the pieces that I can. And anything laying on top of another one, I'm gonna hot glue it. And if it's a side by side, like where I'm putting that tape, then I'm gonna add tape. And I'm adding glue underneath it, but I'm just adding the tape over the top. So I'm gonna do the same thing on both sides. You can see that little arrows are kind of just going over the top of those loops at the bottom. And once I get those pieces down, I'm going to grab those C-shaped pieces that we cut out. Honestly, you could probably skip these little C pieces if you wanted to, but I'm going to grab them here and kind of just move them around a little bit. Kind of just fills in the sides a little bit more and creates a definite line, I guess. But yeah, so I'm still following Chantel's instructions on this part here, so that's why I'm going ahead and doing it this way. Although she didn't use tape, I just felt like the tape held it a lot better than just the hot glue. but I kind of moved those C pieces around and seen exactly where I wanted them. So I've got 2 of those. And then next I've got just 2. Now she did 4 of those top pieces, but I did just the tulip head with the X at the bottom. And I'm gonna go ahead and start cutting my last piece of fence here. And what I'm doing is I'm being careful because I'm gonna literally use each side of this. There's like 4 brackets in it. I'm gonna use all 4 of them. So you can see I'm just kind of cutting out that bar across the top and then leaving, just cutting the loop off the bottom, if that makes sense. So this is just very simple to cut out. This last piece is. It didn't take a whole lot of thought. Some of the earlier pieces were a little tricky of where am I supposed to cut that, but this part was very simple. So once I get those pieces done, I'm gonna set all of those aside. There should be 4 pieces like that. Okay, all 4 of those are cut out, and I'm gonna use these 3. They're just like an M, or like how you might draw like a bird in flight, just kind of like an M shape. So I'm gonna start putting this together. So I've put the 2 bigger pieces, one on top, one on bottom, and she was calling those hearts. And then I'm gonna put my tulip head pieces on the sides, and I've kind of laid them on top of the first 2 pieces, and I'm going to hot glue those together. So I am making sure that my arrows in the center are straight, I guess. But yeah, all of those little pieces that are laying on top of each other, I'm going to hot glue those down. And again, if there's an area where I can attach it with the tape, I will. Mostly I'm using the tape in areas where it's 2 pieces kind of side by side and I can't lay them on top of each other. So I'm starting to add those 4 extra pieces on the sides, kind of filling in the spaces, the 4 spaces in between these. And you could have them come out as far as you wanted and maybe come out to the same distance as the other pieces, but I kind of liked them coming in a little bit, and it kind of reminded me a little bit of like a 4-leaf clover. So I have them kind of pushed into the center a little bit more, and I am taping both sides, and then I'm hot gluing pieces together. So those M pieces, I'm going to cut those in half, and I'm going to start gluing those on one on each side first, and then I'll do the top and the bottom after. And I do it that way just in case they lay over anything, so that way they're equal all around, if that makes sense. So I'm going to do both sides first, and then I'll do the top and the bottom. So yeah, I kind of liked it, was mimicking that kind of a 4-leaf clover shape in the center. Okay, so once the glue dries on that side, I'm going to flip it over, and any loose parts, I'm going to hot glue them and make sure there's nothing loose. And I'm going to flip it back over once it dries and do the same thing on the other side, just making sure there's no little pieces that can lift up. Although I don't see this falling apart. I'm going to have mine outside, but it's not heavy. I mean, you can literally carry this around with one finger. It's plastic, but I love how it turned out. I think it's beautiful. You could add a Dollar Tree mirror in the center, and I think that that would be really, really pretty too. It would be gorgeous in a living room or a bedroom. And I can't decide if I want the mirror in there or not because it's outside. So your guys' opinions would be fantastic. Should I add a mirror or should I just leave it like this? So anyway, I hope you guys like these 2 DIYs. And of course, as always, I hope you're having a great day. Bye-bye.